I am going to build $1 billion company, $1 billion brand because of the loving and supportive and nurturing environment that I'm creating.
This is Stay Paid, the marketing podcast that gives listeners a competitive edge to stay motivated, find inspiration, and discover proven real-world tactics from some of the best marketers across the nation.
Welcome to Stay Paid. I'm Joshua Stike along with Luke Acree, and our guest today is returning to Stay Paid for the first time in a little over 2 years. Mike McFall is the co-founder and co-CEO of Biggby Coffee, one of the fastest growing coffee franchises in the United States. The last time Mike was here, we talked about his book Grind, a no BS approach to take your business from concept to cash flow. And today Mike's here to talk about his new book, Grow, Take Your Business from Chaos to Calm, which is the second in a planned out 3-book series offering practical advice for entrepreneurs looking to turn their business concepts into successful ventures. Mike, welcome back to Stay Paid.
Thanks, guys. This is great.
Mike, man, excited to have you on the show. We were just talking before we came on. I'm excited about picking your brain when it comes to leadership. You have grown a really successful business. So I'm curious the advice you're giving entrepreneurs. But let's dive right in. Let's start with, why did you write the second book? What are you trying to get across?
Well, the second book focuses in, well, just real quick, the first book is from the day you commit to a new venture to your first day of positive cash flow and the ethos and mentality it takes to do that. The second book picks up at the moment when you're in this bootstrapping entrepreneurial phase. You're in it deep. You're handling everything. And what we really want to do is through the book is we want to work with people to take them on this journey. And the journey is from bootstrapping entrepreneur to effective leader in the organization. But then ultimately we're talking about sustainability of the business. And then that takes the entrepreneur from the effective leader through to what I'm calling irrelevance, which means that you as the entrepreneur can get trucked by a bus and the organization will continue to thrive, right? And so in that first part, from bootstrapping entrepreneur to leader, that is a difficult transition for many entrepreneurs because so much of what made you successful as an entrepreneur gets in your way as a leader. But then also that journey from the leader of the organization through to irrelevance, that one is that transition, I think, is even more arduous because you go from being the leader to being irrelevant, where your phone doesn't ring anymore and nobody wants your opinions and so on. So that's the concept. And really, I think what I'm trying to get through to the world is that this mentality in entrepreneurship of build it, scale it, and liquidate it, to me, it's very much a limiting possibility. And I always ask people when we're having this conversation, build it, scale it, liquidate it, for what? And to answer that question, for what, is it simply to make yourself rich? Is that the end goal of what we're trying to do here? And I think there are a lot more powerful outcomes than simply making the entrepreneur rich.
I love that. I want to get into that a little bit too and pick your brain. Can you talk a little bit? You said something very interesting there. It's like what made you succeed as an entrepreneur oftentimes gets in your way as the leader. Can you give us a little bit more insight into things you see that are those in practice? Yeah,
I think that, when you're that bootstrapping entrepreneur, when you're in the startup phase, you are involved in every detail. You weigh in on everything that's going on. You micromanage, and you really don't have what I would, in most cases, you don't have strong leaders with you. And so for you, it's critical in that phase that you're deeply involved. But as you grow as a leader, you have to grow other leaders. And the only way you grow other leaders is to have them take responsibility and then let them run their worlds. And you can't engage everything, and you have to trust them that they're going to make good decisions and that they're going to propel the business forward, even if you're not at the table or even if you're not weighing in.
Okay, so what type of timeline? This has always been a question for me. Yeah, right. What type of timeline do you give a leader?
That's the $1 million question.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been at it 27 years. and this kind of tips into another thing that I believe is that most entrepreneurs and leaders have too short of a time scope. And so my timeline was, somewhere in the area of 4 to 5 years of getting out of, the startup. And then I went on a journey of probably another 10 years of developing into what I would consider a good, strong leader of my organization. And then it took me another 10 years to get to where I am now, which is at that stage of, we're 95% into irrelevance. And so, that is, we have a very strong president. We have a very strong leadership team at the organization, but, I just want to acknowledge, I just said 25 years and, I'm not the sharpest guy, going, but it is a long, long journey.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like when you lead, cause you're in irrelevance right now, right? And I'm really curious on this. It's like your president that runs the organization. Like, are you managing them purely metric based at this point? Like, is it, like, how do you give autonomy? Like, here's my hard part, right? And I think most people's hard part is I want to let go. I don't want to micromanage, but I have to have accountability, which is driven by metrics and those type of things, tangible things we can measure. If a leader doesn't achieve those metrics, what is the advice you would give to somebody on how they make the decision? Because as an employee, you always have that 3-strike type rule, and you put them on a performance improvement plan, and you want to take that essence and philosophy to your higher level leaders. But let's be real, they're high level leaders. It's not about 3 strikes and a performance improvement plan. You're a leader, you got to achieve the mission. What advice do you give to your people? Like, this is how much time you give a director to make mistakes and learn on their own before you step in and you go, okay, new director, or I'm going to I hate to say micromanage, but I'm going to get in the details again and help you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's that's the $1 million question too. So, I think
if anybody's keeping score, I'm up to $2 million now.
You're up to $2 million already in this conversation.
Josh has 0 only because I'm
in debt.
I'm hogging the convo. But,
I love it.
Yeah. But I'm very curious. You can tell this is on my brain, like, because this is my struggle. We're at about, like I told you, about 300 employees, and we have a leadership team. We probably, between directors and VPs, it's like 14 people probably across the organization. And it's like, how much time do you give them to fail? Because you don't want to micromanage.
Well, I guess in some ways it's hard for me to answer that question because we haven't been failing in any way. And so
I need to join your team.
and so I don't really know. I think what we did is we spent the better part of 4 years working on our purpose, our vision, and really solidifying that. And it became very, very meaningful for us. And we had set these metrics in December 27th of 2018 that set us up for, if we accomplish these 2 metrics, and therefore completed our vision by 2028, that would prove out that we were living our purpose. And so we started that quest in 2018. We realized the first thing we had to do was build a professional management team and bring in what I would call world-class leaders. And then from that point forward, one of the metrics, so there was 2 metrics involved. There was one, which was 9 out of 10 people in our organization that have been with us a year or longer would rate us a 9 or a 10 would rate us a 9 or a 10 on whether we are supporting them in building a life that they love. And then we call that our purpose metric. Our performance metric will be $1 billion at retail by 2028. And so, and we're tracking. And so, like, for me, I don't know, like, if we really started to underperform on those metrics, how long would we give? I would be generous in my allocation there of time. I would be generous, I think. And when you're looking at some metric and it's underperforming, you really have to dive into why, and then go from there.
It's very nuanced. I find too. It's very
well.
nuanced.
How do you resist the temptation to get in there and do it kind of how you want to? Like if you're seeing something you don't like.
Well, the first thing that I advocate is transitioning your thinking that you know how to do it better, because I would argue you don't.
Mm.
And so there is, when we bring in, like we just brought in a woman as our CMO. She handled marketing for Starbucks Asia for 10 years. Asia was Starbucks' highest performing market in the world during that time. We brought in a gentleman as our chief operating officer that has a similar resume. And for me to think that I'm going to step in and that I am going to know the answer better than the woman Michelle that we hired as our CMO, or Cordell, who we hired as our chief operating officer, or John Gilkey, our president, that's arrogant thinking.
Mm.
I mean, I am not a CMO. I am not a chief operating officer. I'm an entrepreneur that worked hard and made some good decisions and got pretty damn lucky along the way. And so I think that for me to think that I can step back in and I can do it better than they can, I think that's flawed thinking.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting because it's one of those things where you truly have to let go and give autonomy, but you have to hold high standards. And one of the things that stands out to me in what you said is you had those two metrics, and that was your kind of North Star, or is your North Star, your guiding light. But there's probably thousands of other variables, right, that affect those metrics, but you're not micromanaging those 1,000 other variables. The reason why I point that out is because in my journey so far, what I've realized is I am too involved in the 1,000 other variables where I need to have the North Star. And it seems like what you guys did well is you had your North Stars really defined. Like, hey, every other thing I can look at and I can say, you're probably not doing this well, you could do this well. But the one thing we're all going to agree on is the North Star. Like, and that's when I will step in. And it's just hearing you say that aligns with where my thinking is at today of the mistakes I've made of going, wow, it's not that, it is that I was micromanaging because I was managing too many variables and we weren't all aligned to just the North Star metric that everybody agreed upon.
Each leader in the organization has to manage to their variables. And so, I think the other piece of this too that's important is that we are, the management team was first. And then the next thing is the formation of a legitimate board that the management team answers to, that my partner and I are on, but we have other key and other strong people on that board. And then that board will determine whether or not the management team is working or not working.
Gotcha.
And so that's the final step for us. And we're in the midst of that right now, of putting that board together. And it is, to me, it's in so many ways comforting, because, when you have this feeling that you have to make the decisions and you have to be the one that controls it, that is a lot of responsibility. And so, deferring that responsibility, or I'm not sure the word, allocating that responsibility to the board, all of a sudden you're a contributing factor, a contributing component of the board, but you're not necessarily the be all end all, especially if you can get high caliber people on the board. And so that is, we expect to have the board assembled by and functioning by the end of 2024. And so at that point, I mean, I truly can get run over, and and my, I own 50% of the company with my business partner. We're co-CEOs, so I guess we both have to get run over by a bus. But but that's the next step for us.
So that makes so much sense. Can I ask you before we move on to another topic? Is how do you recruit a world-class person like the CMO of Starbucks Asia? Like how do you do that? How do you attract a talent level like that into your organization?
Well, whenever I hear people, and this goes right into the content of my book, but whenever I hear leaders talking about it's difficult to attract talent, my immediate thought And sometimes my response, not all the time, but sometimes my response is, you don't have a culture that people want to be a part of. If you have a hard time attracting talent, it's not an organization that's attracting people and attracting leaders. And we've never struggled to hire inside of our company. And so, to me, it is the culture, the environment that you're creating that allows you, it makes you powerful, where people want to come work with you. And so this is a great story. It's a great story. So Cordell Riley, we had him as our keynote speaker at our annual conference.
Okay.
And so we hired him. He came in, he's a high dollar guy to speak, and he comes in and he gives just a bang up presentation. Well, I'm in part of my work with my book series is to create a keynote address that I can go out into the world and have this conversation in the world. And so I called Cordell because I wanted to pick his brain about how to become a keynote speaker. Well, we're in the conversation and he says, I've been thinking about that. I want to get back into management, and I want to do it in a place that I feel great about, and that's an organization that I align with. And he said, I don't know if you guys are looking, but I would love to come in this capacity. And so by being our keynote speaker and getting to know all of our people and getting to know us and getting to know about the organization, he was attracted
That's impressive.
to us, and he wanted to come work with us. And I could go on that, but you got to build the culture that when you're looking for people want to be involved.
Yeah, that's super
and that's
impressive.
the premise of my book, is building that culture.
So talk to me, like, what does culture mean in your mind? Like, because I think a lot of people have different interpretations of like company culture. What does it mean to you?
It's how people feel when they show up to work.
And when you think about like how people feel when they show up to work, right? And I've tried to think about this. Now we're virtual, like our story. I feel like I'm getting free coaching here. It's awesome. Our story is we were 200 something employees right before the pandemic. Had to go virtual like everybody. We never came back because we found that the people really thrived and enjoyed virtual, and it was better economically for the company, a bunch of other reasons. And
so, you can hire people from all over the world.
Bingo.
By the way.
Yeah, we actually now are in 26 states and in 3 countries.
Good for you guys.
So, which is amazing, right? Our talent pool.
That's a big company you guys are running.
Yeah, it's been a pretty. That's why I need your mentorship. I'm like, please help me here. How do you create culture? It's the way people feel. Well, feelings are subjective, right? And so how do you create culture? Because if I'm tied to the whim of how people feel every single day, I'm going to go in a circle, right? Because depending on what's happening in their life, other variables. So like, can you give me some guidance on like what you've done, whether it's through core values or however you've done it to create your culture?
Well, I'm going to try to summarize my 310-page book in a sentence here. But really what it comes down to is the environment, an environment where people feel supported, nurtured, and loved. And I use the word love in my book. And it is something that I believe great management teams, great leaders have always created. We've just never called it that. And so, I go back to, the teachers that inspired you or the manager that inspired you in your life. In my opinion, that was a loving environment. They wanted to support you. They wanted to support you in building a life that you love. And to me, that's the essence of what we need to create in our organizations. I read a metric or a stat the other day that 75% of employees would leave their current position if they found a new one where the work was more meaningful to them. And so, that is what we're trying to create, is a meaningful place where people show up, and work can be what I call it a petri dish, a petri dish of self-improvement for the individual employee. And if we can create that where they're growing and they're thriving and they feel great about showing up to work because of that, and they're supported by their teammates and they're supported by, their leaders, that's a place that people want to be a part of.
Yeah. It's so true.
We'll talk about the trust piece, because I know you talk about trust being the baseline for those healthy relationships. How do you build that trust consciously, I guess?
Well, that's the backbone. The backbone of it all is building the relationships between you as the leader and the individual team members, but also building relationships amongst the team, between the people on the team. But the root of building a relationship is trust. And it's funny, just last night, my wife and I were playing these card games, and so you pull up a card, and one of the questions had to do with trust or something. We were talking, we've been married 10 years in a couple of weeks. And she said, "When do you think you really started trusting me?"
Uh-oh.
Yeah, right.
It's a trick question.
Yeah. And I said, love, I think it was probably about 5 years in. Where I really truly would say I absolutely trusted you, and I didn't have question marks. There weren't, so this trust idea, you don't build trust in 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
You build trust over a very long period of time. You also build trust because new people come into the environment, and you have built these trusting relationships with everybody else. And so they see and understand that works around here, and that you can trust. But, I can go down rabbit holes on every one of these questions, but trust to me is something that you have to work on and build every day, every meeting. That it's something you always have to be paying attention to. Did I, in some interaction, did I deplete my trust account with that person? And if so, if you even have that notion, you got to reach out to them individually. You got to talk about it. You got to bring it up and air it out. And so how do you create that? I think it starts first with integrity. People have to know that what you say is what you're going to do. You're going to live up to your commitments as the leader. And I talk all the time about how the leader has to first build trust. And it's on the leader to do that. The employee is skeptical from day one, just because typically, historically, you don't have these kinds of relationships. So it's on the leader to start that and start to build the trust. And then eventually you will earn the right to lead, and you will earn the individual's respect.
Yeah, it's great. What do you feel like? I know, what was the book? I think it's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. They talk about healthy conflict when it comes to trust. Like, have you found in your career, like, whether it's, we term it radical candor, or healthy healthy conflict, like, have you found that to be true in your business too, that you have to go and have some form of conflict, radical candor, to have absolute trust?
Yeah, if and when it's authentic. And so, I write in my book, the culture, I call it the culture of amazing. And it is such a flawed construct that, the culture of amazing is that anytime anyone does anything, it's amazing. They did a great job, and we're all supportive. And I just think that's bunk, because if you give 7 presentations or in front of a group, and every single time somebody comes up to you and says, "Boy, you hit it out of the park, and that was amazing," like, you might have hit it out of the park once, maybe twice, but 4 or 5 times, 6 times, you probably had, you probably had some things that someone could critique. And so, the issue there is authenticity around the engagement, and I shouldn't say ever, but rarely do you let something go that you need to critique. Because the thing is when you critique, it gives you the permission and the power to support and be positive at the same. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
So, if when I weigh in on somebody and I say, "Hey, that was a really, really nice presentation," they know I friggin' mean it, because the last 5, I haven't said that. And I've said, hey, we should work on this, or maybe this, and so that authenticity is critical.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you can't have true positivity without negative. Like
Absolutely.
You truly can. Yeah, that's really good.
And so the conflict, it gets to a point where you have built such trust with people that it's not conflict. That when you bring something to somebody, they know and trust that you're bringing it to them with the right intention, and that you're really truly trying to help them get better and improve, and they appreciate it. And that is such a different mindset.
Yeah. Better to address it than be silent and only speak up, in the good times. What led you to become an author? I mean, co-CEO of a huge coffee brand, one of the fastest growing ever. What kind of led you down this journey of wanting to write books and tell your story?
Well, I got to go all the way back. When I got involved in the coffee business, I was preparing to go back to graduate school, and I was going to see that through. I was most likely, in my mind anyway, at that point, I was going to end up with a PhD, and I just wanted to teach. And I wanted to study, and I wanted to read, and I wanted to research. And so that was what I was going to do with my life. And then this coffee business thing happened.
Okay.
And 25 years later, and so, one, I've always wanted to. Yeah, to teach and to read and to write. But then the other piece of it is we're a franchise company. And so we attract prospective franchisees. And a big part of our success is attracting franchise owners who align with our values. And so the books allow a prospective franchisee to dive into the mindset of me and my partner and our organization. And that allows them to self-select in or self-select out.
That's great.
And so the idea is that if you read my book and you disagree with it, I mean, it would be irrational to become a franchise owner within our system. But if you really, really align with it, green light, amazing. Let's work together.
How hard has it been because Luke and I have talked about, we've kind of toyed with the idea of wanting to write a book.
Yeah.
How much time has it, taken? How hard has it been?
Oh, it's grueling.
It's grueling?
It's grueling. Yeah, it's grueling. I mean, I couldn't even quantify the amount of time. I would have no idea, because it takes years.
Wow.
And so each book has been about, the first book was like a 7-year journey, but that's just because I had no idea what I was doing. I really didn't understand the project I was working on. And so, I don't think that's a fair assessment, but book 2 took me 3 years. And so, the amount of time is, you really have to enjoy the process. I love writing. I love sitting. I love the creative process. I love editing. I love all of it. And so, you really have to enjoy it to get through it. But I also think that understanding why you're writing a book, and then truly what the message you want to take to the world is critical. And it's like in any business, you have to know what the point is in order to throw yourself at it. And so, I would say getting really clear around what it is you're trying to accomplish with the book, and really the message, what I call the conversation you want to have in the world. What is that?
Yeah.
That's
well,
great.
It's a brilliant idea for attracting, like you said, franchisees and things.
It makes
like
so
that,
much
and
sense.
aligns with your passion. So I got to ask you, as an author, what's the book that's had the biggest impact on your life?
Well, I was Kim Scott in Radical Candor.
Okay.
That's a heck of a book.
That's a great book. Yeah.
I would say, probably from an entrepreneurial perspective, it would be The E-Myth. Michael Gerber.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that one, but that is just a true classic.
Yeah.
And I would get into, I read The Road Less Traveled when I was like 15 years old, 16 years old. And I had a dear friend of mine's dad who was an alcoholic and was a recovering alcoholic and had been in recovery for a long time, and just real wise character. And he kind of made me read that book. And that really unlocked a notion for me, which is that you don't have to do it like everybody else. And I'm real proud of my journey in terms of, not doing it necessarily, the way other people have done it. And I'm proud of that. So that was a really instrumental read, for me, back in the day. Let's see, there's just so many, but I think those three, Radical Candor, that just popped in my mind because you had mentioned it earlier. I mean, that is one heck of a book.
It really is great. Yeah.
Well, when does Grow release? And you have a cool story about the launch of Grow.
Yeah. I'm super excited about it. So, it releases June 6th. And it is, we're going to release it from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange that morning at 10 a.m.
Awesome.
And I'm real excited about that. I'm taking my parents and my wife, and we're gonna go celebrate that. And
that is awesome.
So and then we've got it. I call it this release summer. So it launches June 6th, but I don't even know how many events I have in my calendar between now and September. It's a bunch, and it's going to be fun to be out in the world. And frankly, having this conversation with people like you is super important to me. And I just want to continue this dialogue about something that I am just super passionate about, which is, why can't we create environments and cultures where people go home from work more inspired than when they showed up?
That's great.
And to me, that's the cultural piece. That's leadership. And at the end of the day, if we can do that, we're going to see. I was on a podcast a few weeks ago, and I thought the interview was going really well, and I thought we were in a pretty good place. And the host said to me, "So, Mike, you really think that you can build $1 billion company and do all this loving and nurturing stuff?" Right. And so I'm like, oh, wow, I guess I didn't have the impact I thought I was having in this conversation. And I said, but just a minute, stop for a second. I want to reorient your thinking. I am going to build $1 billion company, $1 billion brand, because of the loving and supportive and nurturing environment that I'm creating.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
And that's a flip in mentality. Because you build an environment like that, I believe the traditional metrics, the traditional financial metrics on a company, you will far exceed any metric that you could ever imagine. And we're living proof of that right now. I mean, it is what our company is doing at 27 years old is just, it's incredible.
It really is. No, It's a super inspirational story and message, and you can feel the authenticity
for sure
coming from you. So thank you again for coming back on the podcast and speaking with us about your new book. Before we close out, let people know how they can connect with you or where they can buy the book, whatever you want to promote there.
Well, the book Grow will be everywhere you can buy books, and then I'm launching a personal website that will go live June 1st. It's michaeljmcfall.com. And so that's, there'll be plenty of opportunities there to connect. And then, of course, on the social medias, that's the other way, right? LinkedIn's probably the best one for me. That's the one I engage more than the others.
Cool. And go buy some Biggby Coffee.
Yes, please.
Mike, you got to
come to Pennsylvania. Get to Philly. We need you in Philly.
Yeah,
I'd love to.
Yeah. You got to get on TikTok, man. Mike on TikTok.
I am on TikTok. I am not personally on TikTok, but I have content on TikTok.
Okay, good. There you go.
All right. Thanks again for being here. Thank you all so much for listening. You can dive deeper into this episode, get the show notes and the links that Mike mentioned over at staypaidpodcast.com as well. And if you enjoyed this episode and want to show your support, head on over to Apple Podcasts, drop us a 5-star review, leave a comment, and we'll read it here on the show. And the best way to show your support is to simply share this episode with a friend. If you want to get hold of me or Luke, you can email us at podcast@remindermedia.com, or you can find us on social media. We are at Stay Paid Podcast. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
Guys, I'm Luke Acree. Mike, a pleasure as always. This was even better than the first one, and the first one was outstanding. Really appreciate all the knowledge you dropped. My action item for everybody on this is, I really thought it was powerful when Mike talked about his purpose metric. And, he had those two different metrics. He wants to be $1 billion organization and stuff, which is kind of like the profit type metric, and that measurable. But he had a purpose metric. And I think to myself, man, what a great action item for everybody listening to this. Do you know your purpose metric? By 2028, what is the purpose that you're trying to fulfill? And what's your measurement of that purpose metric? And I think that's a really powerful thing, because if you think of where culture flows from, it flows from your purpose. And so I would challenge all of you, the difference between mediocre producers and top producers. Top producers take action. Take action on that today.